Hey guys, welcome to DevOps School. In this video tutorial, we are going to learn about Rancher.
But before we begin, let me inform you few things about us. DevOps School is one of the leading platforms which offers DevOps, cloud and containers technology training and certification programs for freshers and established professionals who wish to update and consolidate their skills in the dynamic IT scenario. We ensure that the training solutions are delivered by highly experienced domain experts with practical working experience in various verticals. Check out the dates and enroll with us for our upcoming batches. For more info, link and contact details are mentioned in the description below.
Okay, so today we will understand the architecture of Rancher, and also we'll set up the Rancher in today's sessions. Okay, so we'll have a Kubernetes cluster setup, and followed by we'll set up a Rancher. But before that, let's complete this architecture part, which was a pending stuff. So yep, so Rancher architecture overview. So here in this sessions, we are going to discuss about Rancher is something called Rancher server. Okay, so when we set up a Rancher, basically deploy in the Kubernetes. Though I said last time you can deploy in the Kubernetes also, and in Docker also. You can go for the hosted solution also. So yes, anything which you installed, that we call it a Rancher server. And Rancher server includes all the components used to manage the entire Rancher deployment. Okay, so it contains all the components which you need to run Rancher. Rancher is deployed as a group of namespaces. This namespace is nothing but a Kubernetes. Okay, so Rancher is deployed as a group of namespaces, deployments, pod, and services and ingress on a single node or on a high availability Kubernetes cluster. So today in this session, we will try to set up a Rancher server without ingresses. We'll use the load balancer node type. Okay, so node port type. So that is for the learning purpose. But once again, if you are on the cloud like a GKE, EKS and all, load balancer setup is much easier. We'll do that one also, but later on at the time. So there are difference between Rancher launched downstream cluster and a non-Rancher launched downstream cluster, okay, such as EKS and GKE, EKS and non-RKE. Okay, so this is the architecture layers. Look at this very carefully. So you have a Kubernetes. This Kubernetes can be installed anywhere, whichever you feel like. You can keep it in your cloud, data centers, edge, anywhere, wherever you want. And Kubernetes is powered by containers, you know that. Now on top of that, we installed, okay, on top of that, we installed the some of the Rancher server components. Now, if you see that here, a Rancher server component, which includes the centralized cluster provisioning and centralized Kubernetes security, application catalog, streamlined Kubernetes operations, workload management and GitOps at scale, monitoring, logging, and alerts. So all these things you find a part of Rancher server. On top of that, for integrity identity, you can use Azure Active Directory, Okta, GitHub, or SAML. On top of that, you can use multiple tool sets for observability, monitoring, domains, servers, and all stuff like that. So Longhorn, Istio, Prometheus, Grafana, OND, many products you can use it. Okay, so this is the layers of architecture. So what are the types of downstream Kubernetes cluster? So Rancher installed Rancher Kubernetes engine RKE on the existing node, creating a custom cluster. Okay, that is done by Rancher launched Kubernetes for custom nodes. Now, Rancher launched Kubernetes for nodes hosted in a cloud provider, which you can use Rancher dynamically deployed node in a cloud provider such as EC2, DigitalOcean, Azure VMs, and these pairs, and then install Rancher Kubernetes engine RKE on them. Again, if you go for the hosted Kubernetes provider like EKS, GKE, and all, you can deploy that one also. And registered Kubernetes cluster also, Rancher connects to an existing Kubernetes cluster, setting up the Rancher agent for a communication between the cluster and Rancher. So here in today's session, we'll try to install a Rancher in the custom home section. Okay, so we'll see that. So here Rancher server architecture, look at it very carefully. So here in the Rancher server part, if you look at this, you have a Rancher API server, again connect to the etcd. You have a two controller, cluster controller 1 and cluster controller 2, and then authentication proxy. So basically anyone who wants to talk to Rancher, they communicate through the UI. Rancher has a UI also, or command line, kubectl and all API. So you can use all this stuff to talk to authentication proxies, and from there you can divert all this stuff. Now, if you correlate the architecture of Kubernetes, something similar which we have. So yeah, so KX cluster dedicated for Rancher, you can use it. Now here, when you say downstream KX cluster means what? Whenever you see the downstream, that means remember that Rancher is being used to create a Kubernetes cluster. I repeat, Rancher is being used to create a Kubernetes cluster, multiple Kubernetes cluster, managing the Kubernetes cluster. But here, Rancher itself we are installing in the Kubernetes. That's one part. Right side, which we see, this is called downstream Kubernetes cluster. That means using the Rancher server, you can create again multiple Kubernetes clusters on the different applications, cloud, and also. Are you able to understand this image?
Yes. Can you
Yeah.
explain what is it mean downstream?
Downstream means the cluster which has been Kubernetes cluster which has been created by Rancher server. Okay, got it?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so here overall this is the architecture. You can see that it's the same image, but it's official image. Here you see that we talk to Rancher through UI, CLI, or API, or kubectl, and then we instruct to the Rancher server. Hey Rancher server, please create more clusters. And here Rancher server create a cluster 1, cluster 2. This cluster and cluster 2, cluster 3, cluster 4 can be created on different platforms. Okay. Here, how these communications happen between the Rancher server and the downstream user cluster. So you see that here. First of all, we talk to the Rancher server using the authentication proxy. Okay, that is a one thing. Now, after that, all these requests sent to the cluster controller, which is a part of the server. So you have a multiple controller, 1, 2, cluster 1, 2, 3 controller, minimum 2 controllers are there. So now, if you look at this, each controller they talk to the 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 downstream user cluster using the cluster agent. Okay, and also they talk to the Kubernetes API server, because remember that you create a cluster, so they talk to the API server for any instructions as such. Okay, and remember that each node in the Kubernetes you have a kubelet. Again, kubelet communicate with the cluster controller, and that is how this whole communications happen with the downstream user clusters. Okay, can you hear me?
This
So
conference will now be recorded.
So we were discussing about how this communication with the downstream user cluster happens. So here, remember that we connect with server, Rancher server, using the authentication proxy, and after that, authentication proxy pass data request to cluster controller, and cluster controller send that request to the cluster agent. Okay, which is nothing but an API server of the Kubernetes cluster, and then API server send the request to kubelet, and for kubelet again you response tunneling happen to the cluster controller, which is of a Rancher server. So that is how the total communications happen. Okay, so this is a entire architecture. So here defining server Rancher server architecture. So we have authentication proxy, we have a cluster controllers and cluster agent, and then we have a node agent, and then we have authorized cluster endpoints. So what is a authentication proxy? So authentication proxy forward all Kubernetes API call to downstream cluster. Okay, the one which you see in this image, you see that on top, that's me. I'm writing the kubectl get pod, and that request sent to the authentication proxy, and after that it will send to the controller. So yes, the authentication proxy forward all the Kubernetes API call to downstream cluster, communication with the Kubernetes cluster using the service account. Okay, so the communication, that how this communicate, we use the service account for that. After that, we have a cluster controllers and cluster agent. Look at this image one more time. Here in this image, you have a 3 clusters controllers. And then if you see the downstream clusters, user cluster, there we have a agent. That's what we are discussing right now. So there is a one cluster controller and one cluster agent for each downstream cluster. Remind it, there is a one cluster controller and one cluster agent for each downstream cluster. That means here, if you see that, look at this. Here you have a one cluster, one controller. Okay, one downstream cluster, one cluster controller. If you have a two downstream cluster, so you will have a two constructor cluster controller. So like that, understand that. So here there is a one cluster controller for and one cluster agent for each downstream cluster. Downstream clusters have cluster agent which open up a tunnel to the corresponding cluster controller within the Rancher server. Okay, so downstream cluster, which is, you see that image, you see that there's one agent, cluster agent. Okay, so downstream cluster have a cluster agent which basically helps this controller to open up a tunnel to the corresponding cluster controller within the Rancher server. Now, third thing, which we have a node agent. If you look at the image here, last one, the downstream user cluster, you see, basically each downstream user cluster runs on the multiple nodes. So here each node you have a kubelet, right? And here you have a node agent also. So here let's understand that. So the Rancher node agent basically run as a daemon set. I repeat, this Rancher node agent runs as a daemon set on every node in a Rancher launched Kubernetes cluster. Now the question is, what is the daemon set? You know that, right? Correct? Son? Hello?
Yes.
So daemon set is nothing but a pod. Okay, daemon set is nothing but a pod which is running on each node of the cluster. So let's say you have 5 node, one master and 4 worker. All 5 nodes will be having one pod running. That's called daemon set. So here this Rancher node agent is nothing but a pod actually, which is running as a daemon set on every node in the Rancher launch cluster. Look at this one image downside. There is a node agent written, right? That's a pod actually. Okay, so so the node agent interact with the node when performing clusters operation and can act as a backup when cluster agents are not available. Okay, so node agent can also act like a backup. Now fourth component which you can see is authorized cluster endpoint. Here you see that authorized cluster endpoints here in here. If you see that through API server, authorized cluster endpoint will be published. So fourth component is authorized cluster endpoints. An authorized cluster endpoint allows user to connect with cluster API. Look at the right side, fourth step, last step. Fourth, alias is connecting to the API, right? So here, authorized cluster endpoint, an authorized cluster endpoint allow users to connect to the Kubernetes API server of an Rancher launched downstream cluster without having to route their request through the Rancher authentication proxy. So here, in a simple way, if I say, in a whole architecture, you see, server talk to the downstream user clusters using the first use the proxy, and then each clusters will have one downstream cluster will have one controller. Controller send the request to the cluster agent. Cluster agent talk to the API, and then through the node agent, which is nothing but a pod running as a daemon, through that they communicate. Now, if any cluster has been set up using the Rancher, so again, fourth step, you see the fourth step, Any user can talk directly to the API server of that particular cluster. That person no need to go to the again authenticating with the authentication proxy and stuff. Typically, that the way you work with a single cluster, same way after the deployment you can work. Make sense? Hello.
Yes. Yeah. Can you go to the next picture?
Hello.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Architect.
Yeah. This one, right?
No. Another. Yeah.
Here.
That. Yeah, no.
This one.
Uh, Another
Same image.
ones. So if we need to if rancher want to communicate with AKS or ZKE, so we need to install cluster agent, right?
No, that will be installed automatically. Understand that? You just need to understand. It's like how this communication happens. When you deploy Kubernetes cluster using Rancher server to AKS or EKS or GKE, so these nodes automatically will be installed for you on behalf of by the Rancher server. You don't have to do that. When you want to do manually, again you have to install the daemon set and you need to configure the daemon set. So that's a manual process. But when you deploy the downstream Kubernetes cluster using the ranchers, everything will be done by rancher server itself. You don't have to do anything. But the communication happens using the cluster agent, which is nothing but the one pod running in each node as a daemon set in the each downstream cluster.
Yes. Can you explain a little Kubernetes?
Yeah.
Kubernetes, what is it mean? Kubernetes.
Kubelet.
Yeah.
Kubelet, right? Kubelet, see, when you set up a Kubernetes cluster, every node, forget about the rancher now here, forget about the rancher, understand about the Kubernetes. When you set up a Kubernetes cluster, in every node, there is one tool you install that's called Kubelet. So Kubelet is nothing but a Kubernetes agent, actually. I repeat, it's a Kubernetes agent, which is installed and running in the each node of the cluster. And that is how this helps to, combine the clusters, all the nodes into the as part of the clusters. So Kubelet is an agent of worker and master in Kubernetes. Okay, here Kubelet is out of the scene, right? So here
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
that three nodes are there. Three nodes are there. So that means three kubelets are there. That way.
Yes. Okay, I got it. Architect for Kubernetes. Kubernetes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, yes, Rancher server architecture component, which includes user interface. So yes, you can talk to through the command line also, but UI also you have. So you have Rancher UI, Rancher API UI, and multiple frameworks also and types are there. Norman types, utility, there command line utility catalog application. So there are many other components also apart from that, the one which we discussed. Okay, so now let's move on to the second part of it, and that is how to deploy and manage the Kubernetes rancher. So now we'll have some demo also. So let's understand the deployment requirement. So as part of these sessions, we are going to deploy the rancher, managing the rancher, deploying Kubernetes with the rancher, and managing Kubernetes with rancher. So these are the things we do that. So how can we deploy the rancher? So here we can deploy the rancher with some of the requirements. So here some of the requirements which includes operating system, which has to be modern Linux. Distro supports 64-bit x86, not ARM, and container runtime, of course, is a Docker is required. Okay, so Docker is required for all nodes that will run RKE, Distro. Rancher support any Docker compatible container runtime such as containerd. You need an ingress also. So ingress, I would say right now we will go without an ingress, but in future we need an ingress because we can't have a multiple load balancer. So ingress can be set up in the public open source ingress also available. For example, Nginx, we can get an ingress from the cloud platform like application load balancers and all also act like an ingress. So that is also can be used. So each Kubernetes node that running Rancher should run an ingress as a daemon set. Okay, so that is important. Manage Kubernetes clusters such as EKS, GKE, EKS, and RK2 require you to set up ingress. Okay, disks again, Rancher performance depend on etcd in Kubernetes clusters, and performance SSD disk are recommended for backing up the Rancher management Kubernetes cluster and networking. So it is recommended that each Kubernetes node have a static IP or a DSCP reservation if the static IP is not possible. So yeah, these are the small requirements. Again, long list of requirement you can read in official documents just for get started. Now, in terms of memory requirement and CPU requirement, you can see that if you want to set up clusters of small or big, small, medium, large, X large, what exactly? So small cluster, that means if you want to set up a Rancher server and you want to deploy the downstream cluster up to the 150 cluster, then you should be having 1500 nodes, 2 CPU for each nodes, RAM each node, so you should be having 8 GB RAM. By the way, this is for the production server. You don't get scared. That's for the learning purpose. We don't need this much of stuff, this many nodes. Okay, so this is for the just the production environment. Okay, for the medium 300 clusters, if you want to deploy 3000 nodes, something like that. So this is just for understanding pictures. Okay, some of the support requirements which you need, this we need to study a little bit in a detailed way. So port requirement differ based on the Rancher server architecture and KX cluster distro which you are using basically. So these are the port requirement we have. Okay, so Rancher deployment options. Which are the options? Yes, you can deploy the Rancher in the Linux host, which can be virtual machines, it can be physical machines, it can be VMs on the cloud also. You can deploy the Rancher in the cloud Kubernetes, which is managed by the Kubernetes, such as KX or RK on cloud VM, Azure, AWS, GCP, or DigitalOcean. You can host it Rancher deployment also. You can use it, such as KX, RK on your own VM and stuff like that. So these are the options. First one we will try in this session. Okay, now what are the deployment method which you have? So you can deploy the Rancher server using Helm. You can deploy the Rancher server using Terraform. You can deploy the Rancher server using Vagrant. You can deploy manually also. In this session, we will try Helm. Okay, but you can do through the Terraform also, Vagrant also, and manually also. Okay, so these are the methods. So Helm, yes, Helm can be used for the AWS EKS, AKS, GKE, and managed KS also. So yeah, Helm is a preferred one. Some of the tools which you should know that will help you to get onboarded with it. So Rancher Helm deployment prerequisite. So some of the tools is something like KX cluster installed on a VM or bare metal server. Rancher KX distro RK and KX, manage KX cluster AKS, EKS, and all stuff like that. Some of the tools we need is kubectl Helm. I will show you that. And we need an ingress controller for the production. For the development, you can use the load balancer also. Load balancer I'll use with the node port, stuff like that. So that is possible. For SSL configurations, you can use Rancher generator TLS certificate, or let's encrypt, or bring your own certificate. So bring your own certificate. That means if you have a certificate, you can apply that. If you have if you want to get a free certificate, you can use the let's encrypt. If you want to have a Rancher generated TLS certificate, that is also possible. So these are some of the prerequisites which we have. Okay, so what are the steps to deploy? Very simple. Understand that these are the steps which we are going to do now in some time. So first step, add a Helm chart repo to your Kubernetes cluster. That is the first step. After that, create a namespace for Rancher. Then after that, choose your SSL configuration. In this session, we will use the let's encrypt. Okay, that's a free certificate service provider available. So we'll use that. Fourth one, we will install the cert manager. Okay. Fifth one, we have is like install Rancher with Helm and set options. Okay. And last one, verify that the Rancher is successfully deployed. So these are the 6 options which we have in order to deploy the Rancher server in any Kubernetes cluster. Okay, these steps I'll show you through the demo also. But before that, are you having any questions and stuff like that? Any questions?
Hello.
Hello?
If I want to install in virtual machine, I am using Ubuntu. Can you show me how to install?
Which machine you want to do that?
I'm using Ubuntu in
Ubuntu?
virtual box.
Yeah. So now I will show you the installation instruction CentOS. Okay, and probably
Yeah.
I'll keep ready the steps for Ubuntu also. Okay, in the next class.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get started with the demo. Deploy Rancher. So first thing is I'm writing the steps, so we should not forget. Step number 1, create a chaos cluster. Okay, this demo I'm doing in the CentOS 7 because this steps I'm having ready made, I can use it immediately. CentOS 7. Okay, but you can install the cluster in any Linux distribution, that's not a problem. That is the one thing. So in this, what I'm going to do, I'm having the master and worker and workstation. Okay, so workstation will talk to the master and master will talk to the worker. Okay, so here just for the sum of the Kubernetes clustered component, I'm talking about the Kubernetes. Okay, so here in the workstation you have a kubectl, and here we have a 4 component. One is API server, which is a pod. You have a etcd pod, etcd pod. You have a controller manager, and then you have schedule. Now few components are additional, which is Docker and kubelet and kubectl. Now these are the components which we have in the master. Now one more thing which I missed it, which is proxy, kubeproxy. Now this is the component which we have in the master. Now in the worker, we'll have kubeproxy, Docker, and kubelet and kubectl. Now these are the components we will have in the Kubernetes cluster. Now step number 1, this is step number 1. Okay. Now, step number 2, what we'll do, install Rancher server using Helm, the one which I discussed, and certificate we'll use from the list encrypt. Okay, so these are the method. Any questions so far?
So you install Rancher in cloud or where do you install?
Yeah, so the CentOS 7 boxes I'll get it on AWS.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so let's get
And
started.
well, yeah.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the 2 virtual machines created on AWS. So here, CentOS 7. So I'll go for the 2 CPU, 8 GB RAM, which is this one. Okay. And 2 machines I need it. And I'll go for 50 GB hard disk. Name, I'll keep it Kubernetes, Rancher. Default. And done. The key, Rajesh Mumbai, here.
So I have VirtualBox. Can I deploy Rancher in on that, right?
No, you can deploy this Rancher in any machines. I'm using on AWS. You can get this CentOS VM on Azure. You can get it in Google Cloud. You can install these VMs in your laptop also. That's not a problem.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, this is for the demo purpose only. So this is a Rancher KX master. And here Rancher KX worker and workstation. Done. Okay, so now I'm going to have this is the IP address for master, and this is the IP address for worker. Okay, now master plus workstation, I'll keep it in same machine. Okay, so now how to set up this one. So first thing I'm going to log in. So let me get it here. I need here. So SSH-I Rajesh Mumbai PM Ubuntu at the rate of this one. Yes, done. Okay, there's some problem. Still the server is booting up probably. Okay, so not Ubuntu, sorry, it's CentOS, right? Yeah, CentOS. Here it is. You know, I will become a root. That's all. So this is the machines. Now the question is, how do we set up a Kubernetes cluster? So I have all the instruction mentioned in this block. So here Kubedian, and you can use this tutorial. Okay, so here setting up the Kubernetes cluster using Kubedian manual way. Okay, I'm sharing these notes in the here. I'll share with you these notes. Okay, so this is the manual way. So
Yes.
I'm following these steps. Step number 1 is not required because it's of AWS. 2 is not required. 3 is not required. 4 is not required. Docker installation. So let's do that. So and clear the screen and paste it. And finally, and
So you install Kubernetes, right?
yeah, so I'm setting up as per the discussion. I'm setting the master, then workstation, then worker. So first of all, in order to install the Rancher server, you need to have a Kubernetes cluster. so that I'm doing it from scratch. It will take 5 to 10 minutes to complete this cycle. After that, installing the Docker. Okay, so I'm following the steps from scratch, so you will have a recording and steps also, so you can do it offline in the home also. Done. Now I'm going to enable the Docker, and after that I'm going to do this special step. This you need it only for Kubernetes 1.2. So here I am going to vi and here copy this, save it, and finally and restart Docker and Docker. Done. So Docker is installed. Now I will add this repo to yum. Done. Finally set in 40 and then setting, and finally I will install the required component. Done. There is some error in order to install this one. Okay. Let me, sorry.
This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry, I missed the recording actually. Yeah, so what I did, I missed the recording. So what I did, I set up the clusters, set up a master, set up a workstation, and set up a worker following this tutorial. And that is the update till so far. So yeah, what you asked, sorry, I could not hear you clearly.
Yeah, I mean that's if we need to install Rancher server, so I need to install Kubernetes, Docker, Pasture, right, on
That's
master node.
That's correct. Here, if you look at this, look at the architecture here. Just a second, hold on. The same thing we discussed here. In order to deploy the rancher, see here. So see here. So in order to deploy rancher server architecture, this is the rancher server which you need to have a one Kubernetes cluster spot. So this one you see, this one you see, if you look at it. So
Yes.
here rancher. So this rancher server which you are having, this is Kubernetes server actually, Kubernetes cluster. Got it?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the second step which we have, and for that also I have a steps for we use hem let's encrypt for the certificate, but we will do that in the next session tomorrow, and we'll complete this session. Okay.
Along with that, you can access our other tutorials such as Docker, Ansible, Jenkins, Terraform, Splunk, AWS, Azure, and various other DevOps related premium tutorials with our channel membership. If you would have any issues with our channel membership, you can drop an email to us at contact@devopsschool.com, or you can also unsubscribe from channel membership anytime if you don't want to continue or did not like the video. To get our channel membership, click onto the join button, select the 3D99 plan, and grow your skills immensely. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries. We will reply to them at the earliest. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, if you would like to access the remaining videos of this playlist of 50 plus more tools which are coming under DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, DataOps, GitOps, etc. Kindly become our channel members by clicking on the joining button. You would have access to hundreds of playlists and thousands of videos lifetime access with this membership. Enjoy.